Hi, YouTube class. Don't be alarmed by my appearance. I know I look like garbage, but it's because my kids gave me pink eye. And yes, actually, I also do have a cold. Boy, I hope it's not COVID-19. But who knows, because they won't test me for it. But I've been reading. I've been reading some of the things that I signed to you. And I've got some things to say about community and a little bit of context for how you guys should be thinking about your YouTube channels as spaces of potential community. So bear with me. I'm going to be mostly talking about the Nancy Baim reading that you have this week. You have a lot of readings this week. Most of them are optional. I really boiled it down into two that are pretty easy and pretty short and pretty important. So do take a look at those. But let's talk for a second about Nancy Baim and what she has to say about the establishment of online communities. I mean, honestly, it feels so bleak to be talking about this right now. But part of her point is that the way we've defined communities in the past, be they geographically located or not, these things translate into an online environment. And that part is really important, especially now. So the first thing worth talking about when we talk about community is space. Now, community has often historically been defined by geographical space. Whoever you encounter every day as you go about your daily business constitutes your community, right? But people have started to think about this in other ways as well. I mean, one concept that might be useful to think of here, especially as we talk about the relationship between geographical space and the geographical metaphors that we use for online space, is this concept. The third place, which is a concept that Ray Oldenburg came up with in his book, The Great Good Place in 1989, has been incredibly useful for community builders ever since, is that there needs to be a place apart from your home. Your home is the first place, and your work or your school, that's your second place, that lets us build social networks apart from those two places. So your church, your community center, your bar, your bookstore, your Starbucks, your park, your barbershop, anywhere you might have a support system outside of family and the workplace is vital for the building of a healthy community in any place. We need some kind of social surroundings apart from the structures of the family and of the workplace or the school environment. And online places can provide that. There's always been a relationship between the online world and spatial metaphors. How else are we going to describe what we do in this virtual world except by using the metaphors of movement through space that we're familiar with in the tactile world, right? So communities gather in online spaces, sites, channels, groups. So we are always using spatial metaphors in order to understand how online communities gather. This is pretty typical, and there's a lot of authors who have written about it. Okay, so Bain says that we have this metaphorical sense of shared space, but we can also think of community as being established through a set of shared practices as well. And we can think about this in a lot of different ways. I mean, a community can be created by something that you all do together. You are a community that plays a pickup basketball game every Sunday. You are a community that all likes to curl, that all likes to drink at a bar, anything. But in terms of online communities, we often talk about things like the rules or the lingo involved in that community. Ways of speaking is a great way to start thinking about this. So I've pulled a couple of examples just from the past few minutes in my Facebook groups. Number one here is a group where you can only say egg, and that is literally all that the group is. It's beautiful. It's beautiful in its simplicity. Truly it is. But you can see here that somebody maybe broke up an engagement. Very sad for them. The next two things are this cat is assembled incorrectly, where everybody pretends like their cat is an IKEA product that has to be returned to the store. And cat and dog-based humor on the internet often relies on specialized lingo and things like the removal of articles here. Not is he a tadpole, but is he tadpole? The term peats to be feet, the term beans to be toes, leggy instead of legs. I mean, you guys know all of this. It stretches back to Eichenhaus cheeseburger, talking about cats and dogs as having a really specific set of vocabulary associated with it.
But these are rules, and the ability to use these terms is a marker of insider status. Insider status is very important if your community is defined by shared practices. I mean, if everybody who goes to your pickup basketball game has to bring their own ball and somebody doesn't, that's a violation of a shared practice, for example. But as Boehm writes, community norms of practice are defined somehow. They are displayed, they are reinforced, they are negotiated, and they're taught through these shared behaviors. In terms of online communities, this is often done through frequently asked questions files, through pinned posts at the top. Again, this is from my own personal collection here, but in my group Weird Paranormal Things to Discuss, you can see that the group topic threads have been, there are the announcements at the top, and you need to read those. If you don't post the same things over and over again. You make sure that you know what you're supposed to post before you just start shit posting. You know what I mean? So, shared practices are incredibly important for the establishment of a community. Read more about this in the Boehm article. I am just scratching the surface here. The next thing that I want to talk about is shared resources and support. As Boehm writes, the supportive exchange of resources is often implied when people use the term community in digital contexts. That's on page 91.
You all know what this means. It means that in a community, everybody supports each other. Sometimes the term that people use for this is social capital. You can, as a member of a community, build up a kind of a capital, something that is a system of exchange even. Mutual support is incredibly important. I'm a member of a group called the Stevens Point Area Moms Save and Support, and you know what they do? They tell each other where toilet paper is in town. I don't know what I would do without these people. You know what? Maybe I wouldn't even have toilet paper because I wouldn't know that it was disappearing off the shelves all over the place last week. So social support is incredibly important when it comes to defining community. These are groups that have defined themselves as wanting to be mutually supportive to one another. And that means that if somebody falls on hard times, that group is going to prop them up, provide emotional support, even material support. You see it all over the place in online groups, especially lately. Keep your eyes out and comment down below and talk to me about the ways in which you've seen social support happening lately in your community, your online communities. Furthermore, some of you have already thought about this way deeper, and some of you have this baked into the very identity of your channel. But in this incredibly strange time that we find ourselves, how can your channel be a source of social support? How can your channel be a community that creates this basically a group where people want to help each other? I think that's an incredibly admirable goal in this place and this time, this stinky time in which we find ourselves. The other places that I've seen shared resources and support lately, just in droves, has to do with my pandemic pedagogy group, because all of us are trying to put all of our stuff online just very quickly, and there's especially a lot of media production classes. They are not designed to be online, so there's a whole group for that, and everybody is sharing resources, everybody is sharing information about Adobe, for instance, and I'm also in the group of people who now have to homeschool their children. So there are so many resources that people have been sharing out there in the various groups which they feel comfortable and they want to give. There's so much giving. How can you give too?
This video is already too long, so I'm going to go past the last three pretty quickly. One is shared identities. That helps to define a group. Obviously, you are a different person in different groups because you adhere to a different set of rules, you participate in different discourses. But because you identify as a certain thing, that might help define you as part of a community. I just mentioned Stevens Point Area Mom Support and Save. Guess what I am? I'm a Stevens Point Area mom. It is a fact. I can't help it. Also, I am a teacher, and I am somebody involved in the pandemic pedagogy group because it is something that I need as part of my identity as a teacher. So identity really plays a role here, and you have different identities for different groups. You know that this is true. We have communities that are defined by race, by class, by gender, by sexuality, and you may or may not be self-defining according to those characteristics. So your identity has a role to play in the communities that you participate in. I gave you a number of articles about this, about racial identity, about ethnic identity, and about globalization. And I imagine we're going to talk more about that as we go along. But it is really important to think that YouTube is a place where people can find shared identity based on these categories, which historically have been tools of oppression, of marginalization, and instead can be a place to find yourself in other people as well. Finally, BAME also talks about interpersonal relationships because obviously online groups, as she says, quote, provide context for forming one-on-one relationships, unquote. She says that on page 99, and really that's what most of this book is about the impact of online environments on interpersonal relationships. But it is a fact that we form close relationships to people through participations in online forums. I think back to the first time that I went to college, and it was way back in the day. I'm not even going to tell you when, but I will tell you that X-Files was a thing, and I was lonely when I moved to Massachusetts and didn't know anyone. But you know who I knew? I knew all my buddies in the X-Files group, and I talked to them, and they helped talk me through a kind of dark time in my life. And I'm sure that you have had this experience as well. These interpersonal relationships that you build up in online communities are real. They are meaningful, and you have the ability to foster new ones.
So in the discussion board this week, what I'd like to do is talk about community, how you've defined community, how your various online groups have defined community, and how you personally can help to define community in your channel. This could be a lot of different topics. Feel free to talk about community in whatever way that you want, and if you'd like to bring other readings into the conversation, definitely please do that as well. All right, I'll leave it there for now.